The Bay of Pigs invasion. What was it? The Bay of Pigs invasion, also known in Latin America as Invasión de Playa Girón, or Invasión de Bahía de Cochinos, or Batalla de Girón, was a failed military invasion of Cuba by the CIA on the 17th of April 1961 in an attempt to overthrow the communist leader Fidel Castro. And now for some background. Cuba has been part of the Spanish Empire for centuries. In the 19th century, Cuban national revolutionaries rebelled against Spanish dominance, which results in 3 separate liberation wars. The 10 Years' War, 1968 to 1978, the Little War, 1879 to 1880, and the Cuban War of Independence, 1895 to 1898. Because of this fact, the US subsequently invaded the island and forced the Spanish armies out. The Cuban Revolution and Fidel Castro. In March 1942, a Cuban general and politician, Fulgencio Batista, attained power on the island, proclaiming himself prime minister and deposing the Authentic Party. He then cancelled presidential elections, describing the new system as disciplined democracy. It was not well received, and a group of revolutionaries called the 26th of July movement opposed and eventually deposed Batista. The domestic effects of the Bay of Pigs invasion. The effects on Cuba from the invasion were 6 Cuban casualties from the Cuban Air Force, 114 Cuban exiles were also killed, and penultimately 4 Americans. And finally, it made Castro wary of future US invasions. The foreign effects of the Bay of Pigs invasion. The failed invasion of Cuba caused great embarrassment to the Kennedy administration. A New York Times article published in January 1960 called trade with Cuba too risky, and about 6 months later, in July 1960, the US reduced its import quota of Cuban sugar, which left the US to increase its sugar supply using other sources. Just following the Bay of Pigs invasion, the Kennedy administration considered trade restriction with Cuba. 5 months later, the president was authorized to do so after Cuba's declaration of Marxism. The Kennedy administration imposed the complete trade embargo against Cuba. After the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, the US imposed strict travel regulations to US citizens.